So we'll do a small recap of last session, what we had covered in last session. We'll start with today's session. Basically, in today's session, we'll see the lookup activity and for each activity. Right, in last session, we had seen copy data pipeline, and we were about to see the stored procedure. So that I will finish it, and we'll start with the lookup activity and copy activity. They are also other type of activities similar to your date, like this one, copy data pipeline. So let me just start sharing. Let us do some previous session recap. So basically in the previous session, what we saw was your copy data pipeline, right, and stored procedure. So basically we were moving the data from the source, that is from the data lake storage or blob storage, to SQL database, that was the sink or the destination. So we use basically pipelines, right? So pipelines are like a mode of transport, right? Let's say you want to go from your, let's say from Delhi to Agra, so you have to use any mode of transport. I can either you can go by, let's say private, let's say you can use bus, right, or you can go by your car or personal vehicle. So what is the mode of transport that ensures the data is being transferred from your, let's say, the source to the sink, right? How does it happen, right? How the data is being transferred from the source to the sink. So in between we have pipelines, right? These pipelines ensure the data is securely transferred from a source to sink. In between you can do the transformation. Let's say you are like say you are transporting, let's say you are transferring CSV file. So inside, let's say using the copy data file pipeline, let's say from the storage account, let's say you are transferring it to the SQL database, and there you are changing. Let's say we have the JSON, let's say in the storage account, you have the JSON data. You want to load it in the SQL table, right? And you want to display the data, right? You want to see, okay, the data should be displayed in the rows and columns, right? Like this rows and columns data should be displayed so that you can configure in between transformation of the data can be done. Let's say it's a very large JSON file, because what happens even in MongoDB or any other databases, basically the how the data is collected, it's collected in JSON. Okay, in JSON you have the key and the value pair is there. How will you load? Because we find it easier to work with the data or to retrieve the data that is in rows and columns. How why? Because we have, see, you can ID is there. If I know your employee ID, if I know the ID, I can easily get all the details. Let's say I know the employee ID 105. What is the employee name? Ramesh. I can get all the details, salary, employee address, employee name. So it's easier for me to retrieve the data or to store the data, right? So here also, here if you store it in rows and columns, it becomes easier for us. Same thing we are doing. So we are doing transformation using the copy data pipeline. Let's say from your stored source, your source, let's say your storage account, right? Inside your storage account, let's say I have one of the storage account. Let's say I have a storage account that, let's see what storage account I have. I've created 4 storage accounts. Let's say I'm using one of the storage account, Azure Blob Storage, for my Azure Data Factory. So this is the storage account which I'm using. So Azure Blob Storage 980, right? So I've added some data in this container, right? What is our data I've added? Let me see. Water containers. Containers are basically like blocks, right? Inside the storage account, they are blocks, or like, let's say you can name it as a container. Let's say you are going for any grocery shopping, you bring different types of groceries. It's a wheat, flour, and sugar. So you have to keep it in them in separate containers. Similarly, these are the containers which help us to segregate the data, right? And add some data. So I've created a new container named input. I've added some data named employee data. So I've added employee data CSV. What data I have added, you can also see, view and edit. I will show you what data I've added. So here we had seen we have added some employee data, right? What is employee data? I've added some employee data having the header or the columns. What are the columns? Employee ID, employee name, employee location, salary, and employee address. How many rows are there in this data? How many rows are there in this data?
6.
So 6 rows are there, including header. We have 7 rows. Okay. Including head and 7 rows are there. And how many columns? You can see we have around 5 columns, right? 3, 4, 5. 5 columns are there. So here this is the data which is there, which I've uploaded. So now in my source, what I have done in my source, I have uploaded this data. If you see, if I click on preview data, you can see what data I have added. Can you see what data I have added? Is it employee data or some other data I have added? Which type of data it is?
Employee data.
So it's the employee data. So I've added employee data, employee ID is there. I've created a new ID. I've created a new column name ID. And I've added employee ID, name, location, salary, employee address. Right? How do I do that? You can create with the help of in the SQL database, you can create with the help of SQL. So this is a data which I've added. This is in the blob storage. When you see linked service, linked service means for data factory, what is the source? What is the source service I've connected? I've connected it with Azure Blob Storage. And what is the data which I've selected? The file name is employee data sheet1.csv. Now inside my sink, I am loading this data inside my Azure SQL database. Okay. I'm loading my data inside where? I'm loading the data inside my Azure SQL database. So you can see this is my database, right? This is my database. Here inside, I'm there inside my query editor. So if you're there inside your query editor will help you to run your queries. So whichever queries are there, you can run the code, SQL query code. So I've written some query code. Let's say I'm creating a table employee data. I'm adding a new column. Let's say the new column is ID. Right? You can see the ID column, right? Inside the output also, you can see the employee ID column. Can you see this employee ID column? If I run this, I've deleted the ID column, but you can see the employee ID column is also there. Then, and the employee ID column, here you can see left hand side, employee ID column, then employee name, then location, then salary, then address is there. And so these are the columns: employee ID having integer as the data type, varchar, employee location, salary, and employee address. Once you run this, where you can select to a top 1000 rows, you run this, and you will not get initially none of the data will be there because the copy data pipeline is not being performed. What is copy data pipeline? Copy data pipeline will move the data from your source. What is the source? Can you tell me what is the source here? What is the source?
Blob storage.
And what is the sink?
SQL database.
Yeah, so if let's say in SQL database, I just write down this code, right? I write down this code, create the table, and select top 1000 rows. Do you think this data will be displayed if I don't configure the sync? I do not configure the sync. I just add the data in SQL inside my data factory, and I write the code and I create the table. I have created this table. And do you think this data will be displayed if I don't configure or I don't add the sync? Will the data be displayed? Yes or no?
Can you repeat the question, sir?
If let's say inside my SQL database, I write the code to create the table. Okay, I've written the code to create the table. Then I want to select top 1000 rows, right? I want to select top 1000 rows. So this is, I will select top 1000 rows from my column, right? This is from my data, right? From my table, I am selecting top 1000 rows, which may be there. Now, if I run this, will I get any output, right? Will I get any output? Will I get any data here?
No, sir.
Why?
No. Just created the table schema.
Right? We just created the table, right? We have created the
Table schema.
table, right? So now I've not given any input. If I don't give the input, right? If I don't have like this data input, what will happen? Nothing will be displayed. If I run this query, it will be blank. If I run this, it will be blank. Nothing will be done. It's running now because what I have done, I have configured the sync. If sync is not configured, it will not run. Okay. If I'm configuring the sync, that is, I'm moving the data where I'm moving the data from my blob storage to SQL database. Once I've done that, it is succeeded, right? Once it has the pipeline is succeeded using debug, then after this, what will happen? I can see my data, right? I can check, okay, my data is being loaded inside my database. Now this data has been loaded. Now we'll see the for each activity in the data factory. Let's see the for each activity and how to configure it. So what is for each activity? We'll discuss first. So any idea what is for each activity? What is for each activity? Any idea?
It will iterate the each object in for each loop.
No? So it will iterate each of these objects in a loop. So let's see.
In a loop, right?
So we'll see how to create this for each, right? So for each, we'll see this in data factory under which of this, right? Under which of the drop down we have this for each activity, right? And we'll see this. First, we'll create the get metadata, then the for each activity for it. So what this for each activity is used, basically, we can use this activity to iterate over a collection of it will iterate over a collection and execute specific activities in a loop. So what it will do, basically what the loop implementation will be there, how the loop implementation will work, we'll see that. So the loop implementation, how it will work. So the loop implementation is done using this for each activity. And it is very similar to your for each looping structure in programming language. So I guess you must have heard about this in JavaScript. Have you ever worked with JavaScript?
Yeah, I heard this.
So there also we have this for each, right? It's very similar to your for each looping structure in JavaScript. So it's very similar to your for each implementation in programming languages like we have in this JavaScript. So what will happen here? Basically, we'll have a storage account, right? We'll first have one storage account with Azure Storage. Now it is having some data. Let's say it is having some data is there. Let's say cars data is there, cars collection. Let's say I'm having data on cars collection. Then what it is being done, now this data is being moved from this storage account, it is copied to another storage. I will move all the collection of data to, let's say, another storage account, right? Let's say another storage account. I'll move it to another storage account, and we'll move each of these files one by one. Right? Let's say we have. So like these files are there. If I want to move it to different storage space, so what I have to do, I have to first see what all files are available. So from cars collection, if I want to move it to the storage, right? I want to move it to the storage or the destination. Let's say the destination. What I have to do, I have to use get metadata activity. The first step will be what using the get metadata activity. I will be able to get all the details, how many files are there, how many items are there in the files. Okay. So for copying multiple files, let's say are there multiple files which are there in storage account, I'll use get metadata activity. So here after this, I will use get metadata activity and I will get the details about the files and I will move it, right? I will iterate. So we'll define them get metadata. Get metadata will get all the details of the files and it will load it inside your for each activity. Right? It will load it inside your for each activity. Now in for each activity, we'll copy each of the files one by one. It will copy it into this container in a specified file format. It will copy to container in a specified file format. That is what we are going to do, right? From get metadata, I will get all the file collections. So these are basically the files inside your Azure storage. Right? This is a file. And let's say I want to move it to destination. I will get all the details about the files using the get metadata activity. Then I will load it inside my for each activity. And there I will copy to the container. I can specify the file format JSON or CSV. And we can copy each of the files one by one. Now let me create a new pipeline. So this is the old pipeline which I will do. I will create a new pipeline. Let me create a new pipeline. So where I can find my for each activity under move and transform, synapse, data, or general. So we'll see get metadata or your for each activity, right? Where are they available? First, you have to configure the get metadata activity, then we'll go for each. Okay, let's configure the get metadata activity. It's available under general. Okay, it's available under general. Can you see get metadata? Just drag and drop it. Right. Yeah, once you have done this, have you all done this? Should I wait? Then, are you all following along? or should I go slow?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Rahul, should I go slow or are you following along?
Pawan, I was not there in last week, so I need to create from starting. I will follow up
Okay,
with
no
this
worries.
video.
But are you there on your PC?
Yes.
You can follow along, right? Yeah, we are doing the for each activity and this one. Just follow along on the PC. Any doubts if you're facing, if you're not able to create the pipeline, you can share your screen. Okay, I will allow the screen sharing. You can share the screen and you can tell me, okay, I'm facing the issue here. I'm not able to proceed. Just wait for me. Okay, I will
Yeah.
help you with that. Okay. So we'll see that. No worries of the theory. I will share you the notes, right, if you want help with that. But you can go through similar to its copy data pipeline only, how the source and sync will be configured, same thing which you're doing here. So try to follow along. If you're facing any doubt, just let me know. Okay. Now I've copied, I've made this one get metadata pipeline to my canvas. And you can just drag and drop, and this get metadata pipeline will come here. So here what you have to do, you have to add a new data set, right? You can see none of the data sets are there. You have to add a new data set. Let us add a new data set. So I have to configure the source. So my files are there inside my storage or my blob storage. So my files are there inside my blob storage. I will go for my blob storage, which
Pawan,
is,
sir, can you share the file with us?
yeah, I can share you the file. I will download it.
Share in chat.
Yeah, I will drop link chat. Just download the file. Okay, click here. You can download the file. Okay. Right, once I've downloaded the file, right, go back to your linked service. There you can select the new dataset, Azure Blob Storage. Now click on continue. There what type of file it is. So this is the file which I've shared. It's a CSV file. So you can select the file format as CSV. Click on continue. Done. So you have to create a link service. Now let's create a link service. Now I have to add a link service. Let us add a link service. Let's say Azure Blob Storage 90, and there I have to select the file. So I've created a input container. Can you see in the input container, I have the file name employee data sheet CSV. If you want, I've also shared it in the chat. You can download from there. So there, I will select the file. Okay, then click on OK. Now you have set the file path. Make sure its import schema from connection and store. Okay, if it's there in from none or from sample file, make sure it is from connection and store. Once you have done this, click on OK. So once you have done this, once you have added the link service to a get metadata activity, you can see we have field list. Okay, click on this field list, add new items. Here you have to add a child items. Let's say where are the child items? Yeah, let's see. Okay, if it's not available, we can go for, let's say, any of the item name if it's available and the column count. Let's go for the column count. It will give us the column count. How many columns are available? Let's see. Let's debug. We'll see if we are able to get the column count of our data which we have or not. Let's see what it is showing us. What's the output? So column count it's showing us as 5. Okay. How many columns we had in the data? How many columns we had in the given data? I guess we had 5 columns, right? And
5
6.
column, right?
Yeah. So we had 5 columns: employee ID, name, location, salary, and employer. So that is what I can see here. Right here you can see the input and output. with input and output. And so now what I will do, I will try to load it inside my for each activity. Right. Let me go to iteration and conditionals, and let me add a for each activity. And let me connect it to for each activity. So what I will do, I will iterate all the data through all the data inside my get metadata activity, and I will iterate through all of my data or all of my files if they are there in the for each activity. Right. Now I will connect this to my for each activity. Now I have to configure the for each activity. Let me configure the settings of for each. So in settings, right? So it will ask us for the items. So what are these items? It will ask us the for file names, or what is the data which you want to copy, right? What is the data you want to copy? So let's add some file name. Let's add the dynamic content. And here, what I will do, let's add some, let's say for reading the file name, so we'll use, let's say, for getting the column count, right? So let's say if we want to get the column count or content, you can go for content. Let's say we are going for column count. So what this will tell us, we'll use the get metadata at the rate activity get metadata one output dot column count. It will display the column count. We'll also see for item name or size, structure, all those things. So let's say we are seeing the column count. Click on OK. Now, once I've added this output for the column count. Now let us add some activity. Now you can see here activities are there. We'll add some activities. Let's say copy data, data flow, notebooks. Let me add a copy data activity. So here, once you have added the copy data, can you see it's asking me again the source and sync. Just now we had seen the copy data, how the copy data works. You have to specify some source and sync. So let's add the source and sync. What is my source? So you can select your source. So I've added my data, I've added my blob storage data, delimited text to. You can preview the data which is there inside your blob storage. Okay, this is the data which I added. Then you see employee ID, name, location, salary, address. Yeah, I will add it inside my source. Now source is done. I have to configure the sync. But before going to this sync, what I have to do, I have to also configure, let's say, file path type. Let me add the wildcard file type right here. What I will do, let's say, here, let's say, add some file name. So here, what we are going to do, we are going to pass each and every item one by one from get metadata activity to for each. So it will iterate, it will work as a loop. How the loop works, one by one, each of the item will go. So like this for each iterator, can you see for each iterator? You have to select it for each iterator. It's only one time. Once you have clicked OK, then click on OK. It will select or it will move items one by one from get metadata to the for each. Now let's add some sync. Let me add it inside my storage account. So what I'm doing, I will add it in another storage account. Let's say this is blob storage 2, right? Okay, this is blob storage 2. And this is your blob storage 1. Okay. I'm moving it from one storage account to another storage account. So this is what, this is my source and this is my sink. This is my source and this is my sink in the copy data pipeline. Now let me add inside, let me add for the sink, let me add a new data set. Let us add a blob storage. Let's add a blob storage. Continue. So what I want to do, whatever data that is there in the CSV file. This data is what? This data is in CSV. CSV file data is there. I want to convert it into a JSON file. Now I want it to be in a JSON file or key value pairs. Let me select JSON. Okay. Then click on continue. Select the link service, Azure Blob Storage 90. Okay. Select that blob storage. Then you have to select the file path. Let's select the file path. Let me select it into another file. Let's say I will select it, I will select it, I will load it into another file name output. Let me add a new container here. Let me go to my storage account and let me add some container. Now the new container where I will load my data will be output. So I will load my data in the output. Let me reload it. So it's blob storage, but I have not selected the file path. I will add it in the output. Yeah, I will add it in the output. You can test the connection if it's successful or not. Then now I can go back to our copy pipeline. Now I will add this one, okay, this pipeline. Then this in new tab. I've not added the file name. File name should be what output. Yeah, look, it's added. Fine. Now the pipeline is ready. I will go to my pipeline too. I will remove this pipeline. Now let me run it. Let me directly move it without adding any wildcard path. And let me load it as inside my Azure SQL table only. Let me load it in Azure SQL table. Let me try running it. I will also set the mapping, import the schema. We will give the mapping for employee ID. Let's say we don't require this one. We'll configure the employee ID. Name, location, salary, address. Then click on debug. So where it's filling, let's see. In get a metadata activity. Let me add, let's say, item instead of column count. Let me get the item type and then copy data. Let me set the wildcard path item file name for each dot item type. Let's say item type. And we'll load it as a JSON file. Let me open it. I will load it inside my output. And then so currently no data is there here. Let's try running it. Let's see if it works. Meanwhile, I will also share today's notes. Let me do instead of ForEach, we'll see ForEach with a different activity ones. We'll see where the result, where the output we are getting wrong. Let us load it inside the stored procedure. So let us load it inside a stored procedure. And the settings, which link service are into, let's say SQL database and the stored procedure name. Let's say SQL DB.